Thank you, DeAndrea. I'm going to read this text to you first and then share just for about 10, 15 minutes at the most. One of the things that I want to do more and more with this group, realizing where we are now, as I kind of looked at the last year and a half, the last year, 2022, a lot of us probably did a little reflection. A lot of us may have been we thought we were glad when 2021 finally was gone and we got into 2022, and now I'm thinking some of us are probably thinking we're glad 2022 is gone. Now we're kind of looking forward to what's next. But the reality is that we don't change. The reality of our being present in our spaces never changes unless we intentionally do that. And one of the ways that I think we do that is what I've often called a spiritual practice, which is the day-to-day, moment-to-moment sort of applying these kinds of ideas to our actual encounters, to our moments. And it's really hard. It's really hard. The other day, I was sitting, my wife and I, we've been married for 45 years. 40, we've been married for 45 years. Anyway, I don't think she's watching, so that's good. But we've been married a long time. And, what's interesting to me is I gifted last year the negativity. Some of y'all saw the negativity in the last blog post I sent out, and two blog posts before. And it was just all the little characters of the nativity, and they're all frowning and scowling, including little baby Jesus. And my granddaughter was like, "What are they mad about?" And I was like, "Well, that's a really good question. I'm not sure why they'd be angry." And then, of course, I wrote about it and reflected on what that might mean. And it's just tongue-in-cheek, right? It's just playful. And somebody picked it up last year. They wanted that at the regifting thing. And then this last month gave it back to me. And so I told Linda, I said, "Well, I think I'm going to take it back, and I'm going to give it back again and see if anybody else wants it." And then Linda looked at me and said, "I want it." Now, y'all that know Linda would know that's really out of character for her. And I just dropped my mouth. I looked at her and I said, 45 years, and I'm still discovering things about you. You're still surprising me. So we're really invited to be present to the moment rather than to sort of to hold to it or attach to it concretely. And that's challenging in all of our relationships, but it's also challenging in our relationship with ourselves and our relationship with our space that we find ourselves in. So that's really what this is about. I want to do more of that and hopefully less and less of the sort of everything around preaching and you all standing here and or sitting here and staring at me. I really want us to have things to grab hold of that we can participate in changing our world and in changing the world around us. So that when Vicki Paycheck, who is sitting here, and we start getting our teams together this next couple of weeks to work at Taste Project, for example, that more and more of you will want to sign up and be a part of that, volunteering at that pay-as-you-can restaurant for everyone. For those without resources as well as those with resources. It's a great restaurant if you haven't been there. And then other opportunities as well. So here's our text. Comes from Matthew 3, verse 13 through 17. We all know, a lot of us know this story. We always hear it around this time of year. Jesus then appeared, arriving in the Jordan River from Galilee. He wanted John to baptize him. John objected and said, "I'm the one who needs to be baptized, not you." But Jesus insisted, "Do it." God's work, putting things right in all these centuries, is coming together right now in this baptism. So John did it. The moment Jesus came up out of the baptismal waters, the skies opened up, and he saw God's Spirit. It looked like a dove descending and landing on him, and along with the Spirit, a voice. "This is my Son, chosen and marked by my love, the delight of my life." So I want to think with you about this idea of what it means to experience this sacredness, literally celebrating our presence in the world. How do we participate in that? And I know a lot of you watching online, and I know some of you in here, and thinking about Brad as well today, a lot of us have experienced a lot of challenges over the last year, losses of loved ones, as well as loss of jobs, or just loss of a way of life. We've just experienced challenges. Or we've got ongoing challenges that we just have to deal with all the time. And I think for us, the challenge is to stop seeing it as a challenge. The challenge is to live into it as an invitation. But it's hard to do that. I get that. It's incredibly hard to do that. But I want to suggest that what if all the disappointment of the previous year, for those of us who've experienced some, or all the frustration for those of us who've experienced some, or all of the anxiety for those of us who still experience some of that. What I want to suggest is that rather than hoping that 2023 gets any better, or that something better happens for us in 23, what if it boils down to us suddenly recognizing that what we are doing is we're failing to really hear our lover? And what I mean by that is you, me, the source of our being, our lover. And it's a very contemplative, mystical way of understanding who we are in relationship to God. But when God looks down at what's happened here between Jesus and John, it's more than just acknowledging, oh, here's now the new empire. This is now Jesus going to take over things. John was a big radical, and John was kind of stirring up a lot of trouble. But now Jesus has taken over, so new order, Jesus is now in charge. Instead of seeing it dualistically like that, because that's how we see everything, and then we take sides, right? We kind of line up, this is our God versus your God, this is how we are supposed to understand Jesus versus this. What if, in fact, what Jesus did is what he's always been doing in these stories? He's flipping the script. And he's saying, instead of me baptizing you because I'm the power, you baptize me because I'm just like you. Because I need to be affirmed by you. Wait. This is God. This is the sacredness. This is Emmanuel, God with us. And God with us is saying, I need you to verify, to validate me. John suddenly realizes he's in a whole new reality. That's what it means to pay attention to our lover, the lover within, the one that doesn't really love that much all the time. The one that doesn't always acknowledge, we tend to beat ourselves up more often than not. We tend to get mad. We tend to control because things aren't going the way that we'd like them to go. We're not really loving this deep lover within us. And so everybody else experiences that too. You see how that works? The idea that John baptizes Jesus and it becomes this whole, John baptizes Jesus, it becomes this whole new way of understanding the relationship of the divine with the human, with the sacral or with the ordinary, is this idea that it flips and it suddenly says, wait, you've been here all along. The divine has been here all along. John, you need to baptize me. And then God looks down and God says, this is great. This is amazing. I'm really pleased with this. It's easy to see it dualistically. I understand that because that's the way it was written 2,000 years ago. But I'm inviting you to see it much more non-dually, much more interconnectedly, because dualism only does one thing. It keeps us separate. Seeing things as either or only does one thing. It defines people in boxes, defines our realities in boxes, and it makes it really hard to see the magic in the moment. Only when we start to recognize and actually practice that, oh yeah, we're that light, we're that joy, we're that love in the midst of this stuff. And God is saying, I'm really delighted in all of this. Why do you have such a hard time figuring this out for yourselves? That's really what this baptism is all about, what it reminds us to keep in mind. Let's see this first slide coming up here. So we talk about Epiphany as being sort of an awakening, sort of seeing things anew for the first time. This is an old image that's been around since the 1800s of suddenly realizing, oh, there's something else beyond that. When we start to realize through quantum physics, I don't know how many of you saw that we're participating in our Christmas Eve service, and Lance Marshall, our senior pastor, talked about the Pulitzer Prize, the Nobel Prize that was won for physics, and talked about non-locality that we've understood as around. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance, this idea that you can have a particle over here, this subatomic particle here doing something, and then suddenly if you split it, the other part of it somewhere else, it could be miles away, it could be on the other side of the planet, suddenly reacts and does something too, does the same thing. They have a simultaneous reaction at a distance. How is that even possible? Now, it's still theoretical, in the sense that we don't know why it happens, but now these three scientists, these three physicists, actually proved it does happen. It actually happens. It's no longer just a theory, it happens. Why? Well, we're still trying to figure out, everything about life. The 90% of what we don't know out there in space, that's dark matter. But what we do know is that when we approach things from a place of unknowing, we discover. when we approach our places from a place of humility and less from control or defining or defending, we find something else there that we didn't think. Now, what do we call that? I call it an epiphany. I call it a sudden recognition that there's something connective here that's better than the moment when it was divisive, that's better than the moment when it was separated, because now we've made a connection, we've discovered something. So seeing the world not as we are, as Ananias Nin would say. Let's see that next one. Ananias Nin, the author and philosopher, we don't see the world as it is, we see it as we are. Seth Godin, some of y'all know Seth Godin, or have read some of his stuff. He's a great sort of business guru, communications guru, kind of an independent spirit that's written a lot of books that made a huge difference for a lot of folks in entrepreneurialism and such. But what he said once was, he said, it's worth repeating time and time again, nobody actually sees the world as it is. Now, it's not a bad idea for you to walk around and say that from time to time every day. Maybe several times a day. I'm not really seeing this as it is. There's something more here. Just because I think I know who you are, I'm probably way off. My wife loves it when I define things and how we should act, because I definitely know who she is and what she wants. She reminds me oftentimes that I've missed the mark again. But that's part of the challenge of being in relationship. And we do it in relationship at work, in relationship in casual relationships in small groups, in our daily encounters with others, on the highway when people speed past us, whatever. We're always encountering moments that we define because it's more comfortable that way, we think. But think about the anxiety that it creates. We also create this anxiety because we have to control that moment by defining the moment. What would it mean to recognize we don't really see it as it is? We don't really understand the world as it is. And so we pay more attention. This is what I want to suggest to you is really present at this baptism. Let's see this next one. I like this next one. Isn't that a great image? I love that image. I've got that image up at my office at home. And I'm still the one on the right, by the way. I haven't figured out yet how to get to the left side. But there really is this, we think sometimes that if we stop and if we really practice being more present to really what's going on within us, as well as in our space, if we just take deep breaths and we pay attention to the silence and to the stillness, we start actually recognizing something. We're attached to all sorts of stuff. The first time I started practicing meditation, I could not get all of the noise out of my head. I still have trouble doing that. After 2 minutes, all sorts of thoughts just keep rushing to my head. And I get frustrated. And I remember going once to one of my meditation sort of mentors and asking him about this. And I said, I'm doing it all wrong. And they said, no, you're doing it exactly right. Except now, every time something comes into your mind, say hello, and then say goodbye, and then wait for the next thing. And say hello, and then say goodbye, and then wait for the next thing. Because you're starting to pay attention. You're starting to literally be mindful. And after a while, you'll get better and better at not making judgments and not being attached to things as much. Now, I'm still working at that. But I'm getting a little bit better. I can go a minute sometimes without really thinking about a whole lot of stuff. And it's kind of fun when that happens. So Jesus arrives, and everyone is already making up their mind around him. Everyone is already deciding, John is already deciding who he is and how we're supposed to be. Let's go to this next quote. Einstein said, the most beautiful thing that we can experience is the mysterious. It's the source of all true art. He to whom this emotion is a stranger, who can no longer pause to wonder and stand wrapped in awe, is as good as dead. His eyes are closed. So let me ask you as we go into this next season, where is it that you have experienced awe? I mean, literally just something that overwhelmed you. Caught you up in the moment, and you suddenly realized, I hadn't seen this way at all. This is amazing. Or you felt just lighter because of that moment. Where does that happen for you? Does it happen often? Did you realize not only is it neurologically good for you, you can actually do this on a regular basis? I'll invite the band to come up here because I want to share a quick little last story with you. One of the first stories I ever told when traveling to schools. There was a queen in the Far East long ago who decided to leave her kingdom to her 4 daughters. She was going to go off to find herself, find the meaning of life. She said, I'm going on a pilgrimage, and I'm leaving the kingdom to you. So she left. But before she left, she said, I'm going to give you each something. It's very special. I want you to hang on to it. Give it back to me whenever I return. Remember me by it, if you will. And so, it wrapped up in a silk cloth, to each one of them, she handed a small grain of rice. Each one took the grain of rice and thanked their mother. And then they wondered, why is this so special? But she said, I'll take it back from you when I get back. So when she left, the first one took the grain of rice and thought to herself, well, I will take care of it. And so she took it in a silk cloth, she put it in a crystal bowl, and then she locked it up with a lock. She knew it'd be safe. The second daughter, she took the grain of rice, and she hid it in a small little silk purse and hid it under the mattress, where she knew it would be safe and no one would find it. Be there as long as it took until her mother returned. The third one, she took the grain of rice, she looked at it, and she thought, this is ridiculous, and she threw it out the door. And she thought, what's a grain of rice? It's just a grain of rice, and it's easy to find. If my mom comes back and she's looking for a grain of rice, I'll go get one more. And so she forgot about it. The fourth daughter thought about it for a long, long time. Now, after some years, when the queen returned, she asked each of the daughters, what did you do with the gift that I gave you? And the first daughter rushed back to the room, got the crystal box, opened it up, and said, I took very good care of it. Here it is. And she gave it to her, and she took it back, and she said, thank you. It's lovely, thank you. The second daughter pulled it out from underneath the mattress, gave it back to her mother. She said, thank you as well. The third daughter had disappeared for a moment, came back from the kitchen, and she handed her a grain of rice, and the mother smiled and said, all right, thank you. The fourth daughter suddenly looked shocked. She said, I don't have it. I guess I don't have it anymore. And the queen said, well, what did you do with it? And she said, well, this is what I was thinking. I thought a grain of rice was a seed. So this is what I did with it. She took her mother to the back of the palace wall, where they could peer out over the palace wall and see the fields beyond, where there were several rice fields now. Because she realized it was a grain of rice, and if she would plant it, she could harvest more rice, and then plant more rice, and harvest more rice, and plant more rice. And then that gift could actually feed the kingdom and any strangers that come by. Well, of course, as the story would end, you realize she was the one who then became queen after her mother had passed. The challenge I think we have is to recognize we are both grain of rice and field. We are both the gift and the giver in all of our moments. When John baptized Jesus, what that story was saying is, it's not sacred out there and now power is coming to take over. It's sacred right here, and now power is in our midst. The power to transform the world is here and now. So the question for us is, how do we begin to prepare the field? How do we begin to allow this space? Because it's a fallow time in reality in our world, right? I mean, in this time of year in our area, this is a fallow time. Winter, things are kind of laying dormant. But how often do we take time to be still and literally think, what is it that means so much to me that I need to let go of so that it can grow? That's what we'll be thinking about for the next several weeks. Amen.